welcome to today's webinar. My name is Eric Roevers. I'm the Global Head of Solution Architecture at Aris. And today's webinar is about risk and resilience, management of risk and resilience. So today I have with me the esteemed Michael Rasmussen. So Michael, I think many of you know already. He's an internationally recognized pundit on governance, risk, and compliance management and performance management. I think I have to say, governance, performance, risk, and compliance management, with over 28 years of experience, helping organizations improve their GRC processes and choose technologies that are effective, efficient, and agile. He's a sought-after keynote speaker, so we are very lucky to have him today. An author and advisor, and he is noted as the father of GRC, having coined the term way back when at Forrester. So Michael, welcome.
There I am.
There you go.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. So thank you for being here. We are doing this webinar because you recently wrote a white paper on the topic of risk and resilience management that is available from our website. So everyone tuning into this webinar, you can get the paper from our website, the Aris website, the Software AG website. And I wanted to sort of have a chat with you on what the paper is about, what some of the key messages are in that paper, and what are your views on risk and resilience management in this day and age. So Michael, can you give us a little bit of a taste of sort of the general premise of that white paper and maybe some of the key ideas that are in there?
Certainly. Now, in that context, I would say first that when it comes to resilience, that there's a lot of focus on that, and there's a lot of regulatory focus on that. A lot of the regulatory focus is in financial services and those industries that support financial services, whether it's the EU DORA, Digital Operation Resilience Act, the UK Operation Resilience Act, the CPS 230 down in Australia, or it's more guidance like from the United States OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, or the Basel Bank for National Settlements guidance. And so a lot of times people think about operational resilience and they think financial services. But the reality is, and a lot of the focus on the paper is, risk and resilience is a concern across organizations. Over the last 5 years, through the pandemic and conflicts and just supply chain disruptions and economic uncertainty and cyber attacks and ransomware and all this, what organization doesn't want to be resilient? Every industry, every organization wants to be resilient. In fact, one global hospitality firm that I'm working with right now, they've been testing the waters with the business, rebranding their department that's called Risk and Assurance to call it Risk and Resilience. And they find that adding that resilience word in there, they get more buy-in and support from the business. This idea of risk and resilience isn't just for financial services, it's for all organizations. In fact, the modern organization is what I characterize as in the paper as navigating chaos. It's changing minute by minute, second by second. Laws are changing, regulations are changing, the business itself is changing, the external risk environment is changing, and we have to keep all of this change in sync. And that is a significant challenge for organizations today. How do you keep all that change in sync? Being knowledgeable about the risk in the external environment doesn't make us, resilient if that operational process lacks the controls and things in place in there. We have to keep all of this in sync, all this continuous risk, regulatory, and business change. The other factor that leads into this is that the modern organization is not defined by brick and mortar walls and traditional employees. The modern organization is the extended enterprise of third-party relationships, vendors, suppliers, outsourcers, service providers, contractors, consultants, brokers, agents, dealers, intermediaries, and more. Their issues are your issues. And to manage risk and to be a resilient organization requires looking at those supply chains and vendor relationships. It requires looking at the extended enterprise. You cannot be resilient without really looking at this. And in fact, you look at EU DORA, the Digital Operation Resilience Act, or UK Operation Resilience, there's a huge focus on vendors, suppliers, those third parties as well. You know, the physicist Fritjof Capra stated this so well, where he stated that the more we study the major problems of our time, the more we come to realize that they cannot be understood in isolation. They are systemic problems, which means that they are interconnected and interdependent. Now, the physicist at the time of this quote was talking about biological ecosystems, but he might as well have been talking about risk and resilience in the modern business today, that it is an integrated environment. You look at the pandemic from a few years back. What starts off with a health and safety risk, being a pandemic and a medical situation, downstream impacts the performance risk of the organization, the culture risk of the organization as we lay people off, we move people to a work from home environment, to cybersecurity risks and privacy risks in the home office environment, to supply chain disruptions, and we saw so much because it's an interconnected risk environment. We have to stay on top of all of this. And that's the challenge, is we can't be managing risk in all these little siloed departments and functions. One firm that I'm working on their RFP right now, they've interviewed 30 different risk departments scattered across this huge organization. They found 10 different risk platforms already being used in these isolated areas, and they have no visibility across all these risks. We need better visibility across risks so that we can be a resilient organization. But the other aspect of all this is that too often risk management today, particularly in the United States, and I live in the USA, but I would say that the USA has a lot of maturity to do in risk management. Are there good risk management programs in the United States? You bet there are. But in general, I find that risk management in Europe is much more mature than it is in the United States. And in Europe, you see a lot of focus on ISO 31000, where risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. What are the overall entity level objectives, the division, the department, the process, the project, the asset, or even the relationship level objectives in a third-party relationship? What are those objectives? Risk is the uncertainty to achieving those objectives. Objectives can be financial, strategic, operational objectives, ethical objectives as well. And risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. But too often our risk programs are like driving a car by only looking in the rearview mirror and on what's happened in the past. Objectives are what's in front of us. Where's the car headed? Not what's in the past. The information from the historical is still important. We need to be able to glance in the rearview mirror. We need to be able to glance at the dashboard. But the reality is we have to focus on what's ahead of us. It's absolutely crucial and important.
Yeah. So,
okay,
Michael, quick housekeeping question. I think your audio is breaking up a little bit now and then. Just asking to the guys backstage if it's just me or if it's in your stream.
Okay, let's see. I just switched something
here. It's in your...
Does that help? Testing.
Let's try. I mean,
okay.
The proof of the pudding, etc., etc. So I think that's a great way to start off the topic, and I think one of the key aspects here is the level of agility, right? That organizations require, in the last decade or so, what we've seen is that the model of 3 lines of defense has been adapted to create more agility by bringing the first and second line together. Obviously that has improved agility already, but agility continues to be one of the key concerns in organizations related to risk management in particular. So what can organizations do to further improve agility?
What can they do to improve agility? Well, one is to focus on the objectives of the organization and go through different micro simulations, wargaming, tabletop exercise. What are the risks to achieving those objectives? So to be agile means that we're not just, like on the last slide I shared, not just going to be looking in the past in the rearview mirror, but it's looking at where are we headed? What are the objectives? What are the different scenarios that those objectives can play out in the uncertainty in achieving those objectives? And what's the best path forward for the organization? Agility is absolutely critical. And I'm going to go into more of that too in a few slides here.
Okay, so I've been told by the people backstage that the problem is on my side. The audio problem is on my side, not on your side. So As long as other people can hear you, fine, we're good to go. Now, I think that you sort of sum up in your paper a lot of different aspects. Maybe we can share that slide that you created about it, the top 10 challenges that companies face. And here the question of risk agility comes back, but it's only one of many challenges. Can you share a little bit more around this?
Certainly. And we were just talking about the idea of agility, and that's really where it starts, is that a lot of the challenges companies face is lacking risk agility. They're focused on the past and historical views of risk and not on the road ahead of them. And we need to be able to be agile. And that's ultimately what resilience should be able to deliver, is not only resilience, but also agility, to be able to navigate the organization around the risks and even leverage risks to the advantage of the organization. So a lot of organizations, one of the challenges they face is the lack of risk agility. Then you have fragmented and inaccurate data, like the one firm I mentioned that has 10 different risk platforms scattered across with no full visibility across risks. Another large European organization I'm interacting with has 7 different platforms, and they're trying to consolidate. Lots of RFPs to consolidate because all these departments of risk have gone about their own ways without getting the big picture. It's often what I characterize as the Winchester Mystery House, in San Jose, California. And so we have the Winchester Risk Mystery House, the Risk Mystery House. This is a sprawling mansion built in the 1800s. It cost $5.5 million US to build then. That's one very expensive house today. It took 38 years to build, but had no design, no blueprint, no architect. At the end of the day, it has doors open to walls or 20-foot drops, halls or stairways that go to nowhere. That's a lot of risk programs out there that over the last 38 years, they've had 140 different builders of risk management with no design, no blueprint, no architect on how risk should be governed across the organization. They have that fragmented and inaccurate data, that limited visibility, inefficient workflows, inadequate risk reporting. One firm I was talking to was spending 200 hours every year to build a risk report for the board of directors and all the risk events that have materialized. 200 hours every year. The last year they did it that way before they went to a software approach to this that brought it all together. They could just do it in a few minutes, get it. But 200 hours last year they did it that manual process way. They found out they had risk issues that started 11 months ago. They're out of control now. That's not managing risk. That's reacting to risk. That inadequate risk reporting, limited scalability, too much resource of intensiveness. One mid-sized bank I worked with on their RFP, 80% of their staff time was actually spent managing document spreadsheets and emails for risk assessments, not actually managing risk. 80% of their staff time is being wasted on chasing emails and halfway filled out risk assessments and not managing risk. There's ineffective collaboration, resilience planning gaps, and difficulties in change management because the business is changing, processes are changing. You need to understand the business, how the business operates, the processes, how they are structured, how the services are delivered. And this is why business process modeling and enterprise architecture are so essential for good governance, performance, risk, and compliance. Absolutely essential, because we have to be able to keep all this current in the context of keeping up with business change.
So if I was recently at an event and with many heads of operation resilience, predominantly from North America. And we had a former regulator speaking there as a keynote speaker. And what he said is, if he's doing exams around resilience, he really wants to go to the details of how the business is being operated. So this actually connects to what you just said about understanding your processes and your business architecture. He wants to go down to the level of swim lanes. Now, you're a risk expert, but I want to get your opinion about something which is dear to my heart, which is process mining. And the thing is this: my suggestion was that the swim lanes that we are showing to the regulators are idealized ways of working. They don't capture all of the variation and the different execution patterns and the rainy day scenarios that actually happen day to day in the business operations. So would you agree that using process mining would help to enhance the documentation that you could use not only to identify and mitigate risk, but also to provide a more complete picture to regulators?
Most definitely. We need process mining. We need process modeling and architecture because risk is not done, separate from the business. Good risk management is done in the context of the business, how the business is structured, how it operates, how those processes function and deliver value to the organization. And so any type of good GRC program is going to be built on a good understanding of the business, its objectives, and those objectives down into the processes themselves that deliver on those objectives.
Absolutely. So actually, this regulator referred to the regulatory authority as the fourth line of defense, and I think that is a major change in the way that they've established themselves with regards to the internal audit and the first and second line. Whereas they're saying, well, actually, we are taking a stake in how the business is operated, because if you fail, not only you fail, but the impact on the wider economy is such that we need to step in and take accountability ourselves, take responsibility at least ourselves. So that resonates very well.
And I think a lot of our understanding.
Sorry, I was interrupting you.
Oh, no problem. It was very valuable. A lot of our understanding of what risk is needs to change. U.S. President Teddy Roosevelt said, "Risk is like fire. If controlled, it will help you. If uncontrolled, it will rise up and destroy you." I mean, risk is a tool. Judge Mervyn King from South Africa, he's the impetus for the King 1, 2, 3, and 4 reports on corporate governance. He said, "Business is the undertaking of risk for reward." Businesses take risk for return, to make money. And Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise and Star Trek, Season 2, Episode 20 of the original series. He's got this executive committee out there, and he's got Spock and Scotty and Bones. They're all in there, and they're making a decision. Do they go on this mission? And Captain Kirk says, risk is our business. That's what this starship is all about. That's why we're aboard her. Every business is a starship of risk. You take a starship, you bring it back to like a ship here today, like a sailing ship, like a freighter or a vessel. The safest place for a ship is in a harbor, but that's not what ships are designed for. They're designed to go out there in the ocean where there are risks. Every business takes risks. Are we taking the right risks? Are we managing those risks well? Do we understand how the business operates? I was teaching my Risk and Resilience by Design workshop in Amsterdam a year back. And there's a chief risk officer for a medical device manufacturer in Europe that was there and shared the story that he was getting interviewed for his position as a chief risk officer. And he's in this executive boardroom where the CEO, CFO, COO, and we're all there. And the CEO looks him in the eye and says, "If you're going to be our new chief risk officer, what does that mean to me as a CEO and these other executives?" And this candidate that was being interviewed, who got hired, looks the CEO back in the eye and says, "It's my job, if I do it correctly, to ensure that you have no surprises in achieving your objectives." The CEO says, "That's the best answer anybody's ever given me for risk management," and he was hired. But that's what the role of risk is. What are the objectives? What are those process objectives? What are the overall entity level objectives? What's the different scenarios and things that can play out to achieve those objectives? And what's the best path forward? It's to minimize those surprises. Good risk management is going to be managing this in the uncertainty as we try to achieve those objectives, from the high level entity objectives down into those different division and process level objectives in the organization. It's absolutely essential. But as we've already shared, this requires resilience. But resilience, by definition, is that capacity to recover from a risk event. That's the definition of resilience, is the ability, if I'm running down the trail, like in the slide here, and I trip over something, resilience is how quickly can I get back up and start running again. While that's important, we need what we've already been discussing, Eric, that agility, the ability to navigate and leverage the environment, to be able to see what's happening and what's coming at us. This all comes together that we need good risk agility and risk resilience. Risk agility is that ability to move quickly and easily, to think and understand quickly as we try to achieve those objectives. Risk resilience is that capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. The ability of a substance or object, or in the case of a business, a process or a service, to spring back into shape, that elasticity. You need to have both risk and resilience. But one other thing that this requires is that we bring together a top-down view of risk aligned to the objectives, as well as that bottom-up operational control view of risk. Now, there's this Greek tunnel, this tunnel in Greece, the tunnel of Eupanelos. And maybe I mispronounced my Greek wrong, but this is built like 3,000 years ago. And what's amazing is that they started on one side of the mountain and the other side of the mountain, and 3,000 years ago, without modern engineering, they came together in the middle and were aligned as they built this tunnel from both sides. And that's what needs to happen with risk management. Is we need this top-down strategic view of risk to the objectives and strategy and performance of the organization that's aligned to this bottom-up operational risk view of risk around the processes and controls, and bring this together. And a lot of organizations haven't been very successful at achieving that. So what organizations?
Sorry, there seems to be a little bit of latency on the line. I hope that is not also me only, but I think in addition to connecting those resilience requirements and your strategic objectives, so that is essentially like a lateral connection that you need to make between those two sort of factors that aspects that factor into how you operate the business. And I think this slide really is about how do you take it to the next level. Ultimately, all of the requirements land at the business and IT operations. They have to implement ways of working that comply with the various different requirements, that are aware of risks and mitigate those risks. And I think this is where the view of having your business architecture completely mapped out so that everyone is on the same page. How are we running this part of the service? Where are the risks? Where are the threats? Where are the vulnerabilities? What are we doing in order to mitigate those? What do we do in cases disruption does happen? So I think that is the let's say the second part of these of this alignment that needs to happen. Would you agree?
Oh, most definitely, yes. This can't be done without a strong understanding of the business and how it operates. So in the paper, I go into a great detail on developing this approach where we bring together a risk and resilience management strategy. And you have to understand it is what I call a federated strategy. It's not distributed where different departments are going in different direction without any coordination. And it's not centralized where there's one massive department for risk management that oversees all risk. It's more what I call a federated model where there's a chief risk officer type role and function, but understands risk is scattered throughout the business. There's IT risk, there's privacy risks, there's a range of other operational risks, there's strategic risks, there's financial and economic risks, there's regulatory and legal risks, there's environmental risks, health and safety risks, quality risks, there's lots of risks. And then there's risk by departments. I was sitting down with the chief marketing officer a few months back, and this chief marketing officer said, I've never had a chief risk officer ask me what my risks are in marketing. But that's what needs to happen is what are marketing's processes? What happens if Google changes its algorithms and all of a sudden we're not appearing in searches and we're not getting business and our brand tanks? Every department and function has risks. And we need to understand those different departments and functions, their objectives, the processes that support them, and measure and map risks to this. And this is actually what is often called the rhythm of risk. And we need that conductor of risk. One of my favorite approaches to risk management was with Brad Jewett. But he was the enterprise risk manager at Microsoft about 15 years ago. He's now the CFO of Corel Corporation. But he had this whole approach he called the rhythm of risk, in which he'd sit down with the different executives and different levels of management and operations at Microsoft, and he would map out what are your objectives? What are the risks in your area? What are you being measured against? And then he would provide them contextually relevant risk reports based on that. He called it the rhythm of risk, managing risk in the cycles and patterns of Microsoft's business. But good risk management is going to require that orchestration in which you've got a lot of departments of risk. You go to a good symphony orchestra, and you got the violins and the violas, the cellos, the bass, the woodwind, the brass, the percussion, all these different functions. Now, left to themselves to do whatever they want for music, it would sound awful. you need that conductor that can see across these different departments and functions. This is that federated approach to risk management, where you have that chief risk officer type role and that department function supporting them that coordinates and gets the violins working in sync with the violas and the cellos and the bass. All these different risk departments to get them to work together and to see across this. Now, the other important thing for good risk and resilience management is to bring both together the left brain and the right brain. A lot of risk management historically has been stuck on the left brain, that logical and structured thinking about risk management. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes, said, "It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. Insensibly, one begins to twist facts to suit theories instead of theories to suit facts." But that's that logical, structured risk models. It could go as far as Monte Carlo analysis, Bayesian modeling, all that. But what's just as important today, particularly to be resilient and agile, is that right brain, that creative and imaginative thinking about risk. Alvin Toffler said you can use all the quantitative data you can get, but you still have to distrust it and use your own intelligence and judgment. Good risk management can bring both left brain and right brain thinking together. Now my father was an accountant. My brother is an accountant. They love the left brain. They love the mathematical structures and stuff out there. They love math. I tolerated math. I went to law school. I got liberal arts degrees, and I'm a right brain thinker. So while I understand a Monte Carlo analysis and simulation, my favorite risk analysis is a bow tie risk analysis, where you got that risk as the knot of the bow tie on the one side. It fans out on how this risk can materialize and all the controls to put in place to reduce it. On the other side, this risk materializes, become an event. All the controls need to be in place to mitigate the exposure to that event. It's a visual. You give me a bow tie and my right brain thinking says, I never thought of that. What about this? We're missing something here. We need that good right brain thinking just as much as we need that left brain logical, structured, mathematical thinking on risk to be agile and resilient. And this all comes together in being able to piece this together to understand what is that right level of risk appetite. And we also hear the word risk tolerance as well. Risk appetite is that level of risk that the organization is willing to accept to achieve objectives. And there's an acceptable range of risk. Risk tolerance is that level of risk that the organization is unwilling to exceed to achieve objectives. And of course, there's risk capacity, where things start to fail as well. But that brings us into the overall paper and the process structure that's all supported by an OSEG illustration I worked on as well. Any questions before I go into
Yeah, exactly. I was just gonna say, because we have in the chat. Let's see if I can find it. I should have pinned it, but I don't know how to pin messages in the chat. But we actually have Michael Shank in the. Here we are. So we had Michael Shank in a webinar. When was this, Michael? I think 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, where we discussed process inventories and process architecture. Is there a way to bring Michael in so that he can share his question with, he can sort of provide some context around the question? But I think this is a great question. So, what is the best practice for capturing all of your processes to be strong from both a risk and resiliency perspective? So maybe this is something that you will answer in the next couple of minutes, Michael. The other Michael. But I think that's a great question. A lot of our viewers are eager to get some insights on from you as well. So why don't we go into a little bit more about the objective map overview and the objective and process and service identification?
Certainly. I mean, this starts with identifying what your business objectives are. And these, again, can be your high-level entity level objectives, division, department, process, project, asset level objectives. And from there, identify our processes and services to that help us achieve those objectives. We need to be able to map all this out, which that requires, process mining and modeling and overall enterprise architecture. So risk, as understood by OSEG, the Open Compliance and Ethics Group that I'm part of, risk is the measure of the negative, unfavorable effect of uncertainty on objectives. Another one is ISO 31000. Risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. OSEG puts in that negative, unfavorable effect. We need to fully define, map, and model our organization's processes and services to understand risk and resilience in the organization's operations. From there, we establish impact tolerances. For each of those objectives and each of those different areas of the process and things, what are the impact tolerances? What's acceptable, what's not acceptable for objectives, processes, and services? We need to determine the level and type of risk the organization is willing to address, and given the level and type of reward it's pursuing in that context. And from there, and this is all goes into greater detail in the paper that we mentioned. Once we understand that acceptable range of risk, we identify the risk. We automate a standard objective approach to identify opportunities and risks that are evolving and impact the overall objectives and performance of the organization. Once we've identified the risk, we then can assess the risk. We identify the possibilities of outcomes that could impact the achievement of objectives and impact those processes. This includes a variety of risk analysis and assessment techniques, like my favorite, bow tie risk analysis I mentioned, scenario analysis, Monte Carlo, and Bayesian modeling. There's a lot that can be added there for risk assessment. But then we get into risk treatment. Here we drive the activities to understand inherent, where the risk is today, the residual, if we take this risk strategy and treatment, this is the residual risk, while looking at the strategies and there's 4, we can accept the risk as it is. We don't do anything about it. We understand there's a risk and we sign off and just as it is. We have risk transfer, like through insurance, hedging, and derivatives. We have risk avoidance, where we make a decision, hey, we're not going to go down that path, so there's no longer a risk. That's not always feasible, but it is an option in some cases. And the one we focus on most often is risk mitigation. Here's our inherent risk. We implement control A, B, and C. Here's our residual risk we find acceptable. And now let's sign off on that and move forward, make sure those controls are implemented. The goal is to optimize value and return while keeping risk within acceptable tolerance and appetite levels in the organization. That moves us into step 6, risk and resilience monitoring. If we've done all this risk identification and analysis and built out our treatment plan, we next need to make sure that risk is being addressed the way we've scheduled for that treatment plan. If we decided in the risk mitigation that control A, B, and C need to be in place, we need to monitor that control A, B, and C actually get implemented and are effective in the organization. So we need to apply a range of processes to monitor risks continuously in the organization. These activities are the ones typically done within the organization to monitor and assess risks on an ongoing basis, as well as the controls and interactions related to that. From there and throughout all this entire process, we have what I call the communications and attestations. These are ongoing processes to manage communication and interactions with risk owners in the business. They are done periodically or when certain risk conditions are triggered out there as well. Any questions or thoughts here, Eric?
So I think that's it. Yeah, that's a great synthesis. And I think there are a couple of things here that I wanted to sort of bring out. One of them is so in order to understand where risks occur and how to mitigate them, you first need to have all of your various different stakeholders on the same page with regards to how your business is operated. So what do your processes look like? How do your systems work? How do they interact? What are your procedures? What are your fallback procedures? What are your recovery procedures? All that sort of stuff. So that begs the question, across all of those different responsibilities, who's actually responsible for mapping that? Or is it a shared responsibility? How would you organize that?
I would say that it's very much a shared responsibility. This is a great place to involve the enterprise architecture, business process modeling teams to bring that in and work alongside not only risk management, but the risk owners. Your chief risk officer doesn't own the risks of the organization. The business owns those risks, whether it's the CFO, the COO, the CMO, the chief people officer, whoever owns sustainability. There's a lot of different areas of the business that own the risk. Risk is the risk role is that facilitator of all this. And so we need to understand, and to me, one of the great ways to identify who owns a risk is who's the process owner where that risk takes place. And so we need that good understanding of that process architecture and modeling. And in that context, who actually owns that process and governs that process, that helps us identify who that risk owner is to be able to collaborate on it with.
Yes. So, by the way, if I can just interject, there's a funny thing. In the beginning of the of the session, I mentioned that I recently was at a New York event, and there a Formula regulator spoke and said something about, I want to see the swim lanes. And he's actually here in the call. So hi, Benjamin. He actually enlisted to this call. He's right here. So that indeed was you, Benjamin. It's great to see that you're here in this webinar. And I hope I didn't misrepresent what you said at the time. So this makes a whole lot of sense. I think that there's a couple of more words that you wanted to spend on the, let's say, the overall framework that you describe in your white paper. Maybe you just want to share a little bit more about that, and then we'll go into some of the individual aspects.
Certainly. Now, in that context, and in the paper, we go into a lot of detail on this. But when you approach this, doing this in documents, spreadsheets, and emails is what I call the inevitability of failure. You're going to find that you're not managing risk, and you're not being resilient. You're managing documents, spreadsheets, and emails, and you're being reactive and not proactive. And you're certainly not being agile at that point. Now, looking for technology to support risk and resilience management and bringing these together, you need technology that has the following critical capabilities. The capability to provide an overall risk and resilience management program across the business, across the different departments and functions that have risk, support for strategic risk management, enterprise and operational risk and resilience, the ability to have 360-degree contextual awareness of risk to objectives. And this is an area where a lot of software falls down because they put the cart before the horse. They think that the world is risk-centric and not objective-centric. The proper view is understanding the objectives and then the risks to those objectives. And then the software capabilities should have strong capabilities for risk identification, analysis, treatment, and monitoring, and be able to identify objectives, define processes, map processes out, put in risk and control points in those processes and services, understand and map complex and interconnected risk relationships, establish and be able to monitor impact tolerances and risk appetite, provide capabilities to go through scenario analysis, business impact analysis, risk forecasting and planning, deliver risk quantification, normalization, and aggregation, particularly as we roll up risk from processes to divisions to the overall entity, allocate risk accountability and who owns that risk and give them visibility into that risk so they can understand their ownership of that risk and where it's at, provide risk reporting and trending, continuity and resilience plan management, corrective and actions and preventive action plans, and be able to manage those risk events when they materialize as well. All those are critical capabilities. And with that, the ability to be able to map the business and understand the business and its processes is absolutely essential throughout this. Mm-hmm. Now, and I'm helping organizations in this area, you need to clearly understand what your current state is. What are you doing today? Maybe you're using Eris and things are working really well and your current state's not a mess. And maybe there's just some tweaking to do. Others, you might find that like that one firm that I'm working with has 10 different risk platforms scattered across the organization with no visibility across risks. And on top of that, they have tens of thousands of documents, spreadsheets, and emails supporting these processes as well. What's your current state? Too often it's that Winchester mystery house of risk that I mentioned, or a Dante's Inferno type look of risk, of chaos and gaps and all this stuff happening. And so what's your current state today? What's your future state? Where do you want to be 1 year out from now or 2 years out from now? And what's your roadmap to get there? And building a business case for risk and resilience management, I build a business case around 4 areas. One is the efficiency, the time saved, money saved. The right risk and resilience management solution and strategy will save time and money. Before, 80% of our staff time is spent managing documents, spreadsheets, and emails. We're going to eliminate that wasted time and leverage technology where that 80% of time is gained to be able to manage risk more effectively. We spent 200 hours to build that risk report for the board of directors. Now we can do it in 1 hour. That's the efficiency. Effectiveness is where the right risk and resilience management solution and strategy will see fewer things slipping through the cracks and greater management and accountability of risk. Then it's resilience itself. The right risk and resilience management strategy and solution will enable the organization to identify and contain risk issues, minimizing risk exposure to the organization. And of course, that agility to see what's coming at us. That's the right strategy and solution for risk and resilience management will enable the organization to forecast risk developing on the horizon and prepare the organization for that best path forward. So this is my risk and resilience maturity model. This is in a separate paper that I have from the one that's out there, because I have a whole paper on this that I'm going to be working on updating again because it's a couple years old now. But I have 5 stages for risk and resilience maturity. You have the ad hoc, where organizations at the ad hoc stage of maturity have reactive approaches to risk and resilience management at a department level. Businesses at this stage do not understand risk exposure. Few, if any, resources are allocated to risk and resilience, and there's no ownership, monitoring, integration of risk across the business. From the ad hoc, we then have the fragmented stage, where there's departments with some focus on risk and continuity within respective areas, but they are disconnected and not working together. Information and processes are redundant and lack integration with siloed approaches to risk management and resilience. The organization is very document-centric, and processes are manual. Defined is a mature department level, but it hasn't gone across departments. The defined stage suggests that the organization has some areas of risk and resilience that are managed well at the department level, but it lacks integration to address risk and resilience across departments. Risk and resilience processes have the beginning of an integrated architecture and ongoing reporting. Accountability and oversight for certain domains such as business continuity, disaster recovery, and/or enterprise and operational risk management are beginning to emerge. The level 4, the integrated stage, is where we start crossing departments. In the integrated stage, the organization has a cross-department strategy for managing risk and resilience across departments and functions. Risk and resilience are aligned across several departments to provide consistent strategy, frameworks, and processes supported by a common risk and resilience information and technology architecture. However, not all processes and information are completely integrated. And then we're moving towards that stage of agile. Now, nobody's told me that they're at a level 5. I've heard organizations feel that they're a 4.5, that nobody's achieved perfection. At the agile maturity stage, the organization has completely moved to an integrated approach to risk and resilience management across the business that includes an understanding of risk and resilience in the context of performance and objectives. Consistent core risk and resilience processes span the entire organization geographies. The organization benefits from consistent, relevant, and harmonized processes for risk and resilience management with minimal overhead. All this is aimed to achieve that agile risk and resilience management. We're aware of risk across our different departments and functions, that we're aligned to work together in the context of this awareness. We're responsive to changes in business processes, changes in the business to keep up with that. We're agile to forecast what's coming at the organization, to go through those scenarios. We're not just looking in the rearview mirror, we're looking at the road ahead of us so that we can go through those scenarios and its impact on the business. We're resilient to find those issues and contain them when they're still small issues and before they become a big issue. We're leveraging technology, like our host Eris today, and in a way that makes us efficient in our time and money. So where are we at with further questions, Eric?
So, yeah, I was going to ask you, I think if I listen to our customers and now that they are, now that resilience is such a major concern, not just in Europe, but across the world, one of the most heard comments is that it's so difficult to basically create a continuous cooperation between all of the various different functions that are involved. The heads of operation resilience typically come from one or another background, right? So they come from operational risk, or they come from business continuity, or from cybersecurity. So they have a natural affinity with those areas. But then resilience is such a cross-functional concern. So it spans from procurement and how you manage your third parties to, as I said, security, disaster recovery, business continuity, but also continuous improvement. So and it affects both your IT and business operations. So I think it's almost an impossible exercise for heads of operation resilience to build a permanent capability across all of these various different functions. So if you look at it from that point of view, where do you assess that most companies are in your maturity model? Is it level 2? Is it level 3? Are they further ahead already?
When I teach my risk and resilience workshops, most often the attendees in the room will characterize themselves like at a 2 or a 2.5, and trying to aim for, anywhere from a 3.5 to a 4.5 is where their goal is.
So that's the short-term goal. And have you seen any examples of maybe even pockets in organizations that are close to achieving a level 5?
I definitely have seen organizations that have felt that they're at a 4.5, but nobody that says that they're the poster child, that they're at a 5. And in fact, I mean, a lot of the interactions I'm getting, particularly out of Europe, and I'm having conversations on EU DORA just about pretty much every day right now. But I have a lot of firms that are trying to figure out how do we address an integrated approach to like DORA with UK operational resilience and bring these things together, because some of these organizations are more at that level 3 where they're managing these as separate programs, where DORA is its own program and like UK operational resilience is a separate program. And they're trying to say, how do we become like that level 4 maturity where we have one program that manages both DORA and UK operational resilience requirements?
Mm-hmm. So Michael, let's go into some of the questions that we got from in the Q&A. And the first question is linked to what I just said. It's from Elizabeth, and she's asking, how do you see the role of business continuity planning in managing resilience?
Oh, to me, business continuity needs to evolve.
You want to take that one?
To me, certainly. But to me, business continuity is evolving, where it needs to step up and become part of enterprise and operational risk. And I think over the next 5 years, you're going to see that the term business continuity starts to go by the wayside, and it's being replaced with the whole area of operational resilience. Operational resilience is this next level of maturity for business continuity that aligns with risk management. I like the US OCC guidance on operational resilience. It's not regulation, it's guidance. But the United States OCC says operational resilience is an effective outcome of operational risk management. I've been saying for over 20 years, I don't understand why we have enterprise and operational risk management groups and then we have business continuity groups and they don't talk to each other. It doesn't make any sense. A good program is going to bring these together, and business continuity needs to become part of enterprise and operational risk. And if that function isn't existing in the organization, that's a great place for business continuity to step up and lead and help build that. But it's not just traditional old school business continuity. It's really understanding the business, how it operates, and helping the business be agile in risk and be able to take risks that are appropriate for the business.
So I don't want to get too philosophical, but I think through digitalization, we have made business so complex nowadays that the traditional reductionist way of managing an organization no longer works. You can see that we've done everything that we can in breaking up the problem into smaller problems and making individuals or individual functions responsible for individual problems. I think now the job is to create those lateral connections again between all of the functions. So managing the end-to-end, the journeys or whatever you want to call them, across all of those functions is going to be the big exercise of this decade, right? Trying to figure out how do we manage holistically the entire organization. And even though I'm saying it myself, it sounds like music to my ears, because this is what process management was always about. It was about end-to-end collaboration across multiple different functions. So I hope that we answered Elizabeth's question satisfactorily. Let me go to let's see what else we have. I think it was possible to bring in Michael. Let me see. I think we already discussed his question a little bit before. What is the best practice for capturing all of your processes to be strong from a risk and resilience perspective? The question is in there already twice. So if we can bring in Michael, that would be great. It would be great to join him, to add him to the conversation. But in the meantime, there are other questions, like here from Neil. Neil Dating-Galing. What do you think about using past data to do risk analysis? Is there such a corrupted or politically influenced past risk cases? Not sure if I fully understand the question, but maybe you do, Michael.
Historical data is important for risk analysis, and you know, the past can be an indicator of the future, but you know, the world changes, and so it's not the only thing. So to me, good historical data on risk and risk events can influence our models and help us, you know, build models for risk quantification and things on it that gives us objective quantifiable information for like likelihood or probability, depending on how you're approaching it, and impact on the organization, and be able to those range of the data helps us develop risk distributions too, because risk isn't a single point like often is on a heat map, but more of a distributed bell curve of risk exposure. And so good data, past data helps us with that. But you know, a lot of that's that left brain thing. We also need that right brain thinking that comes into this as well, because you know, our risk models and data provide us a good foundation, but the world is complex, and the business environment today doesn't always reflect the business environment a year, 2 years, 5 years ago where that data was. So we have to be able to question it and also tell us what's different and have that creative thinking on it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to bring the topic a little bit more on the you know, the use of process capability, process techniques to support risk. So one of the things that we are doing with process mining is we can mine historical process data, like for the last 3 months or the last 3 years, whatever you like, and identify vulnerabilities in those processes, things that you might not have identified in a, let's say, more thought experiment or tabletop type of experiment, but something that does come out of the data. And those vulnerabilities obviously will then lead to mitigating measures. So, you know, this is one of the areas where I think having strong data on the way that you're running your business and making this available to the risk and the resilience community can actually help to improve your visibility of those risks and help to mitigate them.
Yep.
So there is another question here from Lutfi. I'm not wearing my glasses. Lutfi, here we go. Which committee is responsible for ERM? I think this goes back to the discussion about where the responsibilities in the organization are for the various different risk functions, and ERM obviously is one approach to positioning that responsibility in a more centralized way. But what is your view on this?
I mean, to me, it varies by your organizational structure and things like that. And are we talking board level committees or more operational committees? There's a lot more that needs to be put as part of that question to answer it holistically. You know, in some organizations, risk is governed by the audit committee. Sometimes there's a separate, you know, risk committee for the board level. Operationally, there could be an enterprise risk committee or a GRC type committee type that spans different risk roles and functions to get that to work together in that strategy operationally. You know, one financial services firm, you know, breaks their committees up into 4 operating committees. They meet each quarter of the year, and then risks are mapped to each of those operating committees, and just how those committees function to govern the operations of the business. The risk reports are aligned with one of those 4 different types of committees, and that structure. So it really depends on your business and how it operates. Of course, there's influences, like in Germany, you've got IDW PS 340, which is the German risk audit standard, which requires normalization, aggregation, reporting on risk. And so that there's more regulatory structures on some of those areas.
Yeah. And I think there's a connected question also from Neil. I think not all organizations are aware of their level of resiliency. So do company, this is a little, I'm paraphrasing, I'm changing the question a little bit here, but do organizations actually have to live through a CrowdStrike or Boeing moment to start waking up to the fact that resilience is a thing and they need to organize for it? What is your view on it? So how can we convince organizations without having them go through a major accident first that resilience is something that they need to take care of?
I mean, building a strong business case for sure, but there's no way around it. Being on fire and going through the fire, gets people's attention, and so unfortunately, it is going through those big issues and risk events that gets the attention. But without that, it's building a strong business case. But also, I think even if you might not have had that incident yourself, being able to point to how those type of incidents have impacted your peers and other companies.
Exactly. Take lessons from others. And yeah, absolutely. I think that airlines like Airbus definitely double checked some of their procedures and measures when Boeing's doors started to fall off. So you mentioned in the beginning that resilience is not, and basically the evolution of risk management is not something isolated to the finance sector, but you see it in other sectors as well. Now, I know for a fact that some sectors are really, really behind, and they've not woken up to the reality. Beyond finance, what are some of the sectors that are currently already aware of resilience as a major concern and are taking steps to improve their capability?
Well, I'd have to say it's not necessarily a sector, but it's like company size. Global brands across sectors tend to be getting this than smaller firms out there that are buried within a sector. And so I would say large global complex organizations definitely understand this and are becoming more and more aware of this, while smaller organizations tend to, but not always, tend to be more stuck in old paradigms.
Yeah, I think I would agree. One of the things that I noticed recently is that the organizations supplying into the finance sector are now waking up to the fact that they probably have to build a resilience capability similar to what the banks and insurance companies are doing right now, because they are part of the problem. They're waking up to the fact that the banks that they are supplying are not going to be happy with just having an SOC or have to receive some pen test results now and then. Their customers are going to want to co-design some of the recovery and response processes in the case of disruptions, and they will want to test together with those suppliers as well. So one way or another, all of the sectors supplying into the finance sector are going to be impacted by this wave of resilience awareness, I would say.
Yeah.
There's one last question on the chat, and then I think we've managed to answer all of them. Just very, very quickly, because we only have 1 minute left. So how important is the reproducibility of risk analysis findings, especially in the context of generative AI trend in the last couple of years?
I mean, the reproducibility of risk analysis findings. I think that's aiming at the consistency of leveraging AI in the last couple of years. I mean, you want things to be able. I mean, your risk analysis should be defensible. Is what I mean. Maybe I need more explanation on this, but to me, you need good data. Bad data in, it means bad data out, and so. If you have good data that goes into your AI models for risk and things like that, it should be reproducible. I'm a little lost in that question.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what was meant, but maybe Lucas can share a little bit more context directly by sending us an email, and then we'll get back to him. So. that brings us to the top of the hour. Let me go back to one of the starting slides that we had. So where are we? I'm not a I'm not a great host from a technical perspective. So what we've discussed today is risk and resilience management in modern business, and the ways that organizations will have to adapt to become more resilient and to sort of create a more comprehensive risk capability across functions. Compared to a situation for many years where individual risk teams were basically working in to an extent isolation. Michael Rasmussen's paper on the topic is available from our website. This is the first of 2 webinars that we're doing around this topic. The next one is, if I'm not mistaken, on the November 21st. So the next one is the next webinar is on November the 21st, and this is about debunking common myths about operational resilience. Again, with Michael Rasmussen, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into operational resilience. I want to thank you, Michael, for being on the webinar today. I want to thank all of the people that joined us today and asked some really good questions. With that, I think that we are at the end of the webinar. Thank you all very much and have a good day.